In Central America, Nicaragua and Costa Rica are preparing for the proximity of Julia, the 13th tropical storm this year. United States President Joe Biden said that the Armageddon is closer than ever since the 1962 missile crisis. And Saudi Arabia, the state-owned energy company Saudi Aramco, has raised oil prices for its customers in the United States alone. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news. In Central America, the governments of Nicaragua and Costa Rica are preparing for the proximity of Julia, the 13th tropical storm this year. According to the U.S. National Hurricane Center, Julia is located to the south of the Caribbean Sea, and it is expected to become a hurricane in the next few days. In this regard, the Nicaraguan army suspended the sailing of ships to the Caribbean for the next 3 days, and the government says authorities are getting ready for the impact of the phenomenon. Meanwhile, in Costa Rica, the government has activated local emergency committees for possible evacuations in its northern region bordering with Nicaragua. In Haiti, political and social movements warned of the risk of foreign military intervention. The Democratic Order Party expressed its position to any military intervention in Haiti following Prime Minister Ariel Henry's request for help in the face of the country's social crisis. The Prime Minister recently requested the assistance of the international community 3 weeks after gangs blocked access to the country's main oil terminal, limiting the operation of hospitals and water companies amid a resurgence of cholera. In the face of this, the leaders of the platform recommended strengthening the police and the army, institutions responsible for national security, before requesting foreign intervention. On Friday, in Puerto Rico, social movements called for a nationwide demonstration against Luma Energy company to protest against high energy prices and frequent power outages. The protests will reach the vicinities of Luma Energy company's premises in the country. Calle Mayor Rolando Ortiz said some 1,500 families are still without electricity, almost 3 weeks after Hurricane Fiona. He also claims that the official report of having restored service to 95% of the island is false. On the other hand, Mayors Association President Luis Javier Hernandez proposed United Municipal Electric Brigades to implement an operation to resolve the present shortfall in the electricity supply. And the second humanitarian summit is underway in Colombia on Friday, aiming at political and negotiated solutions to a decades-long armed conflict. At the meeting, the parties will be discussing urgent actions that must be taken to achieve a multilateral humanitarian ceasefire and eventually peace. The summit gathers nearly 200 leaders from the 14 territories most affected by violence. Also present at the second summit will be the Colombian former president Ernesto Samper, Senators Iván Cepeda and Ariel Ávila, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, as well as other human rights advocates. The summit includes spaces and work tables that converge in a group known as the Humanitarian Coordinator, as well as other territorial processes. On Thursday, Colombia Agriculture Minister Cecilia Gomez said in a press conference the intention of her administration to build lands for ranchers, to continue the agrarian reform in the country. The purchase of the land started with the offer of Colombian Federation of Cattle Ranchers, FEDEGAN, will be signed on Friday, and the first agreement will be the buy of 3 million of hectares from FEDEGAN, said the minister. This negotiation process reinforces the relations state ranchers and fulfills the peace agreements of Havana, signed in 2016 that helped to in the dispute between the army, the government, and the people who suffered for many years. Colombia has had a decades-long problem with land distribution, which, according to the National Memory Center, is a historical debt of the state, deepened by the armed conflict. Colombia's Institute for Peace and Development Studies in the past denounced on Thursday the assassination of social leader Carlos Julio Silva Borja in the Magdalena state. According to the Human Rights Department, the social leader was killed by hitmen that tried to stop the vehicle where he went. Magdalena's police and the Attorney General's office said they are already investigating the case to find the responsible as soon as possible. The attack against councilperson Silva Borja trails a similar incident on October the 5th in the municipality of Jamundí, Valle del Cauca, when armed subjects attacked councilperson Pablo Ramirez with firearms. This is the 136th murder of a social leader in Colombia during 2022, according to INDEPAS. On Thursday, the Peruvian Congress denied the permission requested by President Pedro Castillo to tour Europe. With 56 votes against, the parliament denied the Peruvian president authorization to leave the country for a European tour, originally scheduled for October 12th through the 18th, a tour which would have included a visit to the Vatican and diplomatic meetings in Italy and Belgium. After a first negative vote, the left-wing magisterial bloc in parliament submitted a request to repeat the voting. However, the plenary rejected the new request with 58 votes against. And the left-wing Bolivian party and also the ruling party Movimiento al Socialismo, movement towards socialism, MAS, decided to declare a state of emergency as a way to prevent plotting and violent actions from the right-wing parties. The MAS party supporters said this emergency state comes into force because of right-wing plans to discredit and attack its leaders and the conspiracy against the government of Luis Arce Catacora. According to the final minutes of the party meeting held in Cochabamba, there is a back plan operated by the Bolivian right wing and orchestrated from abroad to even attempt against the life of the president of the movement, Evo Morales. In the document, they also requested the dismissal of Eduardo del Castillo, the Minister of Government, and Iván Lima, the Minister of Justice, given their clear counter-revolutionary positions. We'll take a short break, but first, remember you can now follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. United States President Joe Biden said on Thursday that the Armageddon is closer than ever since the 1962 missile crisis. With his statements, the U.S. head of state stressed the nuclear threat is real if, and we open quote, things continue to go on as they are, we close the quote. In the scenario of launching an attack against Russian President Vladimir Putin, the head of the White House assured that Putin was not joking when he spoke of the use of nuclear weapons. The missile crisis, known as the October Crisis, took place in 1962 when Washington warned that there were 42 missiles with nuclear warheads from the Soviet Union on Cuban territory. These statements also follow North Korea's missile launch test on Wednesday and the response of the U.S. and the Japanese military. A senior scholar in the U.S. diplomatic affairs has deplored the Biden administration's excessive military aid to Ukraine. Cecile Shi, the senior fellow on diplomatic and security, stated that the $625 million package intended to help Ukraine defend itself includes additional weapons and equipment such as high-mobility artillery, rocket systems, HIMARS, artillery systems and ammunition, and armored vehicles, according to a readout released by the White House after President Joe Biden's call with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. She also mentioned that the U.S. continuous supply of weapons to Ukraine will open a Pandora's box, with disastrous outcomes for Ukraine, Russia, and even for the entire world. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Friday that Kiev is creating risks of using weapons of mass destruction. During his speech at the meeting of the Russian Party's committee, the minister assured that statements such as those made by President Zelensky about a possible NATO preemptive strike against Russia are proof that Ukraine is creating risks connected with the use of weapons of mass destruction. Pointing to new discoveries of military and biological programs, he reiterated that Moscow cannot remain silent in the face of alarming threats. In the early hours of Friday morning, the French government confirmed that an agreement was reached between Azerbaijan and Armenia, mediated by Paris and the European Council. After the conclusion of the meeting between Emmanuel Macron, President of France, Charles Michel, the President of the European Council, Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, and the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, it was announced that both heads of state committed themselves to the United Nations Charter and the Alma-Ata Declaration of 1991, through which Baku and Yerevan recognized the integrity of their territories. It was also stated that Armenia accepts a civilian mission of the Eurogroup on the border with Azerbaijan, and the neighbors agreed to cooperate with the delegation. And France activated its energy sobriety plan, implying an $800 million project to address the increase in energy prices. The Ministry of Energy Transition presented the government guidelines in view of the increase of energy prices. Among the measures, authorities foresee that public street lighting will be kept on for less time and a lower intensity. In addition, companies will have to undertake to turn off the lights in empty buildings, and teleworking will be encouraged in the public administrations, while the state will increase by 15% the teleworking subsidy for public servants. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Saudi Arabia, the state-owned energy company Saudi Aramco has raised oil prices for its customers in the United States alone. The Saudi Arabian state oil company raised by 20 cents the official selling price of crude oil shipped to the United States. The measure will be effective as of next November. Prices for Asia, however, will remain stable. World crude oil prices decreased since June after rising due to the sanctions applied by the West to Russia, one of the world's main oil producers and exporters, following the conflict in Ukraine. Health authorities in Nigeria reported some 56 deaths caused by cerebrospinal meningitis reported in 32 states. A report from the Center for Disease Control in Abuja stated that the deaths occur in a universe of 961 cases suspected of contracting the disease. They warned that cerebrospinal meningitis is a disease prone to become epidemic, and that they are also making progress in creating prevention strategies to avoid its massive spread. According to the World Health Organization, Nigeria has so-called cerebrospinal meningitis belt, which includes some 32 states out of a total of 35 entities, and warned that it could become a public health threat to countries in the region. Polling stations opened on Friday in the Southern African Kingdom of Lesotho for the country's parliamentary elections, but hopes are low that the outcome will end the nation's political gridlock. About 1.5 million people are registered to vote, with polling stations open since 7 a.m. local time and closing at 5 p.m. Lesotho has been governed for the past decade by a string of coalition governments that have proved fractious and frail, and no premier has served out a full 5-year term. Also known as the Kingdom in the Sky, Lesotho has suffered coups and attempted coups since independence from Britain in 1966. The two main contenders in these elections are former Health Minister Nkaku Kabi, leader of the All Lesotho Convention, and his challenger Mathibeli Mokturu, who leads the Democratic Congress, Lesotho's second largest party. When talking to China Global Television Network, Thai Deputy Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul said that survivors of the mass shooting in a child care center in northeastern Thailand are being well treated at hospitals, and gave further details about the situation after the attack.
The situation is at rest now. All survivors have been given treatment and they are already safe. The deceased, which is approximately 38 bodies, have undergone autopsy. So the bodies will be delivered to their respective homes. And for the time being, we will make sure that those who survive and are still in the care of our hospitals will be given the best treatment and medication.
On Thursday, the Malaysian Finance Minister Safrul Aziz unveiled a budget plan amid snap poll speculation and in the aftermath of corruption scandals during the parliamentary session. The recent inclusion of a few $billion in cash handouts and the tax cut fueled speculation that the government may soon call snap elections. Polls are scheduled for next September, but the Prime Minister has been receiving pressure from United Malaysia National Organization, the party, to dissolve Parliament and secure a strong mandate in an early election. In 2018, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Najib Razak, was left out of the elections and went to jail for laundering and corruption. The Finance Minister said Malaysia's economy is expected to expand 6.5% to 7% in 2022, but slow down to between 4 and 5% in 2023 amid a gloomy global outlook. And China has vowed not to close its door to the world. It is also pledged to remain an active member of the international community. The country has become a main destination for investment and market growth over the years. In 2012, the Asian giant's combined trade in goods and services ranked second in the world. After a decade, that amount was up more than 50%, with China ranking top for 2 consecutive years. Since 2017, China has been the global runner-up by the amount of foreign direct investment inflow. It sits tied among the world top 3 in terms of foreign direct investment outflow. Since the Belt and Road Initiative was announced in 2013, more than 100 countries and 30 international organizations have signed on. Participating countries in this initiative now present 70% of the world's total population. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.